Welcome to Connect to Develop, where we provide insight from healthcare leaders on the hottest topic and trends. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Connect to Develop. In this episode, Marney and I are addressing burnout, building a sustainable work-life rhythm. This is a topic that is becoming more and more popular to address in the medical world, even though, I recall it being somewhat taboo to even discuss. And Marney, I would say even probably the same for you in entering healthcare. And so I want to talk about the definition before we dive into our discussion. And so according to the World Health Organization, burnout is a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. It's characterized by three dimensions, and I'm just going to list those out. Feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job or feeling of negativism or cynicism related to one's job, and reduced professional efficiency. And so really burnout refers to a phenomena in the occupational context that should not be applied to describe experiences in other areas of life. So on that note, kind of just preparing the context for our discussion, Marney, when did you experience burnout and what led to it? Kind of thinking back, not only over the course of your career, but even just personally as well. I find that those two can sometimes creep into each other's atmosphere. So give me a little bit of your background in that.
I would say that the interesting thing is I didn't even know that I was burnt out, I think, until years later when I had finally established some kind of normalcy after I had left my last W-2, employment. I think I created my own burnout, quite frankly. And if you talk to anyone who is in a high pressure work environment and they're, your classic A type, must achieve, must succeed, must continue to move, into that next goal, into that next phase of life, I think we all become the victims of our own ambition. And I 150% experienced burnout and didn't realize that I was just living in a fight or flight syndrome every single day for probably years until my body reset itself. And then what I actually thought was maybe panic attacks, anxiety attacks, was I was taking my body that had been in fight or flight mode for years. COVID hit and we were forced, to have what maybe work-life balance if you weren't on the front line of care, where you're at home a lot more for those of us that traveled a ton, or, we're just always on and in front of customers and everything. And then when I started going back into that fast-paced, constantly on the road, my body just decided to mutiny. And talking to a few other people in my industry in similar roles, it was very alike for them to have experienced that. Did you experience burnout in the W-2 or was it after you went into consulting?
I would say both. As I was reviewing the definition, a lot of times we don't even realize that that's how our bodies are responding. So like you, Marney, I don't even know that I realized I was in burnout, going back to kind of just pushing into what was the next thing. There's sometimes this badge of honor around pushing through. And so it's easy to miss the signs until you run way past empty. That's kind of just been my experience. Like I didn't even realize I was going through burnout. And it looks different, I think, for every season of life. Earlier in my career, I think what would have pushed me to burnout looks different to maybe what it is now, current, just having gone through different levels of experience, both personally and professionally. So I would say it definitely started early in my career, just looked different and was fueled by different circumstances. Whereas today, I find myself trying to be a little bit more intentional about self-care, as well as being aware of the things that I need not to get to the place of burnout, but it doesn't always work. Because again, I think by default, we go back into this go, go, go mentality, which is not a bad thing. You're looking to kind of strive into that next thing, but just having that self-awareness. I had no idea what the definition of burnout was. So I think that's really important. Have you found yourself, Marney, kind of this whole concept of badge of honor until you are on empty, until your tank is just completely depleted?
Yeah, I don't know that at the time I would have called it badge of honor, but now in retrospect, looking back of it, yeah, I mean, it was almost a bragging thing. You'd sit down with your friends and your colleagues that had similar roles and similar industries, oh, I worked for 80 hours last week. Oh, that's nothing. I was in 6 different states and I had, 18-hour days, multiple days in a row. And I don't know if it was a badge of honor. And quite frankly, I'm trying to figure out where it got to that, right? Because, we all know you don't run your car into the ground. You take it into routine, checks, you rest it. I mean, we all know that it's an unsustainable model to run at 150% 24/7. So I'm trying to figure out why we even just decided we needed to do that. Was it just a one-upping thing, from like a career and endurance standpoint?
I think it could be a multitude of factors. Definitely, as you grow in your career, there's that competitive, you're trying to have the competitive advantage, right? And the more that you do, the more that you show your worth, and the more that you show your value, it's easy to think that the more that you do equates to security, which I think that looks different today. But I also think it's because we're more self-aware. Now, one of the things that I find really interesting that I'm continuing to kind of navigate is being burnt out or being to the point of exhaustion really affects the way that you show up for people. If you are in a role that you are, supporting a leadership role and you're supporting a team, or it really doesn't matter what the reporting structure is, it affects how you show up for people and even for yourself. And so you really can't offer the very best of yourself if you're burnt out. I have found that when I'm not myself, the ones that suffer the most are even my loved ones, my home, and those that I'm like my touch points. When we were working and kind of still in the office, if I showed up and I'm burnt out, those that I'm touch points every day and interacting with are the ones that are going to pick it up that I'm not myself.
Why is it that the ones who deserve it the least are the ones that we lambast the most when we're burnt out?
It's because it's not intentional, Marnie. I really don't believe that it's something intentional. It's at the end of the day, we are looking for outlets. And sometimes if we don't realize that we're burning out, it comes in a format less desirable, right? You might be a little bit more snappy. You might, respond to something in a way that you typically wouldn't. You might not be able to make the right decisions because you're not in the right headspace. I mean, I'm just giving you some personal examples from myself of points where I have been so utterly exhausted. The other, and it's funny to even mention this on this podcast, but I get really emotional over the course of my life. Like that's when I notice I'm like, I'm not naturally overly emotional. And when I'm high stress or burnt out, I can feel that emotional toll actually taking over a little bit more than I'm used to. And that's kind of a flag. If I'm feeling like something that generally doesn't affect me, really, really kind of get into my headspace and into my emotions. That's kind of a marker for me at this point. Do you have something that kind of triggers or something that you identify that you're like, okay, something is off? What is that for you?
I didn't realize it when I was doing it. And it took probably a couple years later when I was less stressed for people to even have, my loved ones have the courage to say it. But I'm very short tempered when I'm stressed. And I think it's because in a work environment, you're dealing with people of all different levels of competency, of drive, of work ethic, of just flat out caring. And you have to maintain diplomacy. You can't say just what's on your mind. If they're not operating at the level that you are or that you think that they should be, you have to work around it and just pick up their slack. And I think where I notice it now is if I start snapping at people in my personal life because I expect them to operate like a colleague operating at their highest level of functionality, that's when I know I need to take a break and I need to calm it down.
So how do you manage that? You recognize it. What does managing through that look like for you? Do you take a step back? Do you take a pause?
So I've had the opportunity in the last about 4 or 5 months to really find a lot more quote unquote balance, right? They always say, when your work life is going, gangbusters and it's great and everything, your personal life suffers. And that's definitely true, right? Because there was many years where my career was just on the up trajectory and, at the great cost of my, family and friends, loved ones, etc. And now I have an incredible personal balance at this point right now. And I'm working to get that career trajectory up because there's, a big thing that I've been working with one of my mentors on. And I've had several conversations with the person I'm in a relationship. And I said, hey, first of all, this is what it looks like. We're expecting about X amount of years of me working crazy hours and traveling a ton, et cetera. Are you cool with signing up for this? And, he said, yes. And I said, because I love what I do, I will tend to not create boundaries for myself on how much I'm working. And I'll, burn the candle on or burn the wick on both ends or however that saying goes. And I said, I'm going to look to you to yank me back. When you see me getting close to that point where I'm starting to snap, I'm starting to become a person that, I wouldn't want to be around, let alone wouldn't want to expose anyone I care about. I need you to yank me back. And whether that means turn off all my electronics, steal me away for a weekend in the mountains to go hiking, and just enjoy coffee in the mornings and that kind of stuff. But I will make the promise that I will not rip into you if you tell me that I need to stop it. And I look to you to set that boundary for me because I know I can't do it on my own.
Mm-hmm. You bring up a really good point, Marnie, because so much of that is self-awareness. And so if you're not self-aware, then it's hard to be able to, kind of sound the alarm. So to lean on people that you trust to say, hey, if you see that I'm out of character, bring it to my attention, giving them the safety and the ability to kind of come to you and have that candid conversation, because otherwise it can go too far. Because if you don't have that self-awareness, it just slowly starts to creep in. Another area is, how the perspective and the outtake on every situation, right? You might feel negative or overworked or burnt out in the area of work, but then that creates this feeling of being negative and the cynicism that was referenced as we opened in other areas of your life. So I think it's important, to do just what you said, identify your people. Like, who are the people in your corner that are going to say, hey, you're not yourself, what's going on, and like bring that attention.
This brings up a great point because, you bring up self-awareness, and yes, a huge proponent or component of this is the self-awareness factor. But I think you need to have the self-awareness to know that it's a problem. But I also think, for me, I had to change my priorities on how I was defined. For so many years, I defined my personal value off of being that person that someone in senior leadership or, I reported directly into C-suites for the last, probably few years of, before going, completely solo, et cetera. And that was how I defined my personal value, was being the person that needed, that got that call from the C-suite saying, there's a problem, we need you to go solve it. And I dropped in, and I had to be willing to allow my personal value to be defined through other ways instead of simply being that person. And we'll touch about it, in our series about starting a consulting business and going about it your own. But that's probably, in my mind, the hardest thing to do is going from super high dedicated company person, that dopamine hit of the C-suite sending that call in and you dropping everything and flying back out. That's the hardest part of that transition.
I would agree. I'm just, based on what you said, I'm just kind of trying to think through scenarios where that's come up. I don't know if that's an easy task, Marnie, being able to kind of redefine your value around how you see that. That's
You're almost forced to. That's something that I don't think that you do willingly unless, there's people who have major health or other, huge life events where they sit back and they really reflect on what is the meaning of it all at something. I feel like that stage, that you go through, that's forced on you, I feel like.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that companies are doing enough to acknowledge burnout?
It's a very, very loaded question. On one end, a lot of companies deploy many great resources to help manage through that. Some, are actively talking about it. The challenge is every silo of an organization has KPIs that they have to hit. And they're trying to run as lean with their resources as possible. And if you're a high performer, they always say, no good deed goes unpunished. Being someone who can just get it done no matter what comes with the crux of you are now the person that gets called to solve for things that even aren't in your realm because others might not. And so while there are many companies out there with phenomenal resources, they're the ones that create it, because no one's sitting at home alone on a Friday night making up an issue that they need to go solve and fly out Sunday night to do it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So, with that said, what would you say some of your non-negotiables are now? I'm just thinking through like the boundaries that we have in place today that, like, for example, one of the things I absolutely will not sacrifice, and I've talked about this before, is, my yoga routine, right? That for me is just, it's my time to take care of me, any stress that's going on in the day. Again, because we work in high pressure environment, I don't think either one of us is afraid of working really, really hard. It's not about that. It's about, you know, how far do we push ourselves and how are we offsetting that with the activities that are bringing some alleviation to the day, like that you're kind of being able to hang up the work hat and saying, okay, now I'm transitioning. I'm going to self-care. I'm going to eat right. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to go for a walk. That's a boundary that I've set, and it's a non-negotiable for me. Like, that's a must-have.
Yeah, workouts for me have always been the non-negotiable. I've told every employer, every, person I've worked under, hey, I don't care about working insane hours. If I love the project and I love, the scope of work and stuff, I'll just do it myself anyways. But if I'm traveling, especially for work, 90 minutes a day is my time to go to the gym, to get that workout in, whether it happens at night, whether it happens in the morning, I don't care, but that is going to happen. So that's one of my non-negotiables. To manage through it, I think I would hope that I've gotten to the point where just when I snap at someone and, you have that out of body experience, right? Someone that's really close to you, friend, family member, whatnot, comes up and for no reason, it's completely unjustified, you snap at them. I would hope that I've gotten to a point where I could pull myself back and say, okay, you are clearly, like it's 8 p.m. on a Friday. No one's dying. No business is lost if we don't finish this, by 7 a.m. Saturday. Put it down, take a couple of days or whatnot and give back to the people who are investing in you, because, you hear this phrase all the time and it's true. No one from your work's coming to your funeral. Mm-hmm. Let's hope other people do show up.
Oh. Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. You just made me think of hopefully a pearl that our listeners will gain something from too, because it was something so valuable for me. I had someone say to me one time, and this particular person it's someone, a mentor of mine over the years on the anesthesia side. And I was always in awe of how they were always cool, calm, collective in the corporate sector. It just seemed like nothing ever got them out of character. And I had asked them about it and just said, no matter what feels like a fire, you don't respond to it like a fire. And his feedback at the time was, you got to remember what I do for my nature of my trade. I'm an anesthesiologist. At the end of the day, the responsibility for me is I've got a patient on the table. And there's nothing that is going to happen in this corporate side that's going to cause a life. And that's always stuck with me, because he's shown up that way with the perspective of, at the end of the day, his primary responsibility was that patient on the table having surgery and making sure that patient got home safe. So I don't know, that was just really interesting, because I think about it even now, and that was years ago that was said to me. All right, well, as we wrap up, Marney, any final thoughts? If you could tell someone who might be on the verge or feels like they're on the edge of burnout right now, what's, some words of wisdom you would give them?
Oh, man. I would say that it's okay that you got yourself there. So one of the first things is, how did I let this happen? It's not about being smart. A lot of people will sit back and go, I'm too smart for this. How did I let this happen? I'm too smart. Hope that you've invested enough in the infrastructure with the people that you love that are not part of your work environment to where they are forgiving of, the less amount of time, the less amount of attention, dedication, etc. It's never too late to course correct. And you don't have to do anything drastic. You don't have to go all eat, pray, love, quit your job, go off to a different country and meditate, or, do a 20-day yoga retreat and ayahuasca and all that kind of stuff. You can take small steps or whatnot, but I would just say it's okay that it happened. It's probably going to happen again. Let's be honest. If you're still an A-type person and you still love what you do, you are going to find yourself in moments of burnout, but just empower people that you know and you love and you trust to start yanking you back, hopefully before you get to that critical point, and listen to them. If you create that safe space, or you tell someone you're going to create that safe space and say, hey, yank me back when I get, to this level, you sure as shit better do it. Mm-hmm. And respect and applaud, admire the courage it takes for them to come in and let you know that something's wrong.
I love all of that. And, I look forward to just hearing the thoughts of our listeners and feedback that they share on what tools they use, because this is a broad topic. It really is broad, but it does boil back down to a very clear definition, whether, we're aware of that or not. So just look forward to what our listeners have to say. This has been great, Marney. Looking forward to our next episode.
Absolutely. You can find more interviews on our YouTube channel at Marney Reid Presents.